this country. You will be an excellent leader in doing so, and I very much look forward to supporting your nomination and to working with you. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Coons.
I was really appreciative of the dialogue that you and Senator Coons had about the Horn of Africa. I think we see what's beginning to look like a civil war in Ethiopia. I think the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam conflict is growing and could potentially boil over. Sudan and Ethiopia have growing tension and growing conflicts. As you know, the Horn of Africa is of extraordinary importance. We have seen humanitarian disasters there before of staggering human toil. We also have one of the more important shipping lanes where about 10% of all global cargo goes by. You use the words with him that you want to have diplomatic active engagement. What does that mean?
Well, in the first instance, it means actually showing up at the right levels to use what diplomatic weight we have with the government, with the leadership in Ethiopia in the first instance. And there are a number of things that I think, at the very least, would need to be done on short order.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, of course.
So I actually think that all that's great, but can I just ask you, why not appoint a special envoy to the Horn of Africa? Does that seem like something that might?
I'll take a very quick look at that for the reasons that you cite. I share the concern that you have that this is something that the instability that was sparked by the aggression and events in Tigray. Now we have Eritrean refugees who are on the receiving end of atrocities. We have Eritrea possibly getting there. We have other states that are now being affected, and the potential for this to spill over is a real concern. And so, yes, I'll take a look at that.
Waiting for Deputy Secretary, I don't know how fast we'll get things confirmed for Africa overall. I just think that this might be something that merits that because it could end up being another international disaster. I think I mentioned to you when I had one of the more amazing trips of my life with Senator Flake, as well as some of my colleagues like Chris Coons, to Africa. One of the first things that jumped out at me as we were flying to Zimbabwe to meet with Mnangagwa and talk to him about the sanctions we were holding, that he was flying back at that time from China, and the headlines were, "We don't care. China doesn't care about their suppression of minorities, their political processes," and the expansion of the Chinese influence is stunning to me. And I think that is something that is far greater than I think people realize. And I'll give you an example of this, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on the DRC as well. Clearly, we have another refugee crisis there. We have a tremendous makings of a humanitarian crisis. But I was stunned, and I think it was 2019, you can correct me if I was wrong, that 37 countries, including the DRC, signed a letter defending China's treatment of Uyghurs. I mean, imagine that. I've heard my colleagues talk about calling it concentration camps and genocide. And here you have China's influence expanded so much that you have 37 ambassadors to the United Nations, including the countries like the DRC, that have been so thoroughly engaged by China that they are defending something as horrific as that we're going over there. And so that, to me, especially in the continent of Africa, is something that should send alarms to all of us in terms of the global competition between two freedom and democracy and totalitarian or authoritarian governments that suppress minorities and wreak havoc, frankly, in terms of the humanitarian disasters. And I just want to hear more from you, perhaps, about how we're going to meet that specifically in the context of Africa, in the context of from the Horn of Africa to the DRC to challenges we're seeing in the Sahel region. How do we begin to combat that Chinese competition?
Yeah, so look, I couldn't agree more with you, and I think we're seeing in China's commercial diplomacy clear strategic intent that goes beyond the simple commercial proposition that may lie originally at the heart of what they're doing. But we have a couple of things to work with. One is the fact that the way China engages in commercial diplomacy tends to be actually a pretty bad deal for the recipients, except possibly for a leader who may benefit from the corrupt aspect of that. So when China's coming in and it is ladening debt on countries in a way that they can't possibly afford, so that ultimately it either owns the asset when they can't repay it, or resources are taken away from the people to pay off this debt, that winds up being a bad news story. when they bring in Chinese workers instead of using local workers to actually build the projects, no environmental standards, and then the corruption that comes with it. I think more and more countries that have been on the receiving end of China's largesse have come to regret it. That's one piece of it. And I think shining a bright light on the way China engages in commercial diplomacy, juxtaposing that to the way we do it is one way to help. The other thing is, I think most, as I've seen it, and it comes up in the polling, most people in most countries in Africa would prefer, if given the choice, to be engaged with us.
Absolutely. And that's why my hope is, again, often we have these silos, the State Department, Commerce, trade, often that aren't working in a cohesive plan. And what we're seeing happening in places like DRC, where we have rare earth metals and other sort of business interests, is we don't have a holistic plan that ultimately could strengthen the economy of a lot of African countries that play into our sense of larger purpose. I have 6 seconds left. I'm going to use it just to sound off to you about my frustrations in this global pandemic that which is directly related to the economy. And so you have America seeing that firsthand, the suffering. But we will be vaccinated if things continue on this pace. This nation will be vaccinated. This pandemic will be behind us. But in developing nations, like in Africa, I've seen projections that till 2024, it could take to end that, which not only has a grievous loss of life globally, but also means that the economic crises we're already